Hello everybody, welcome back to another video. Today is another episode of reviewing NHL teams so far, as today we got the Pittsburgh Penguins. As with this episode, it's very special because we're going to be having Perlo Wisdom joining the show later on, as we're going to be getting into some more detail about everything the Pittsburgh Penguins did throughout this offseason. So let's get right into it. But before we get right into things about talking about Pittsburgh, I'd like to just say, if you are new to the channel, make sure to slap that subscribe button and hit that like button as well. That'll be very much appreciated. So let's get into talking about the Pittsburgh Penguins and their rough offseason that they had. And to say the least, it was pretty rough for them. They did get some decent guys on the team like Kasperi Kapanen and Jankowski, but honestly, they didn't do the greatest job improving their team. Last year they went 40, 23, and 6. They didn't do that bad last year. 86 points. They weren't the worst team in the world, but they struggled against the Montreal Canadiens in the playoffs. So let's take a look at what Jimmy did in the offseason. He said he wanted to make a lot of changes, and so he did. This was still during the playoffs, and Kasperi Kapanen was moved to the Pittsburgh Penguins for Highlander, very high prospect, and then not just that, a 15th overall pick in the first round, a very steep kind of paying price because this first round was stacked. Rodion Amirov is a great Russian player who's been putting up some great numbers in the World Juniors. Not just that, he's been putting up great numbers in the KHL as well as a young 18-year-old. So a great move by the Toronto Maple Leafs, an absolute fleece the Pittsburgh Penguins. Let's Kasperi Kapanen. I don't know. I love Kapanen, but he hasn't been able to find a proper home. He's been all up and down the lineup for the Toronto Maple Leafs and wasn't really able to find, oh my god, a home. Jesus Christ, almost choked him on saliva. Christ. Anyways, if I can find the Pittsburgh Penguins here, Jesus Christ, look how unprepared I am, guys. But Kasperi Kapanen will most likely be playing up on the first line with Sid the Kid, most likely. Now, will Kasperi Kapanen be able to break that 20 goals that he had that year? Honestly, I don't know. I think Kasperi Kapanen will be very good for the Pittsburgh Penguins, but not for the price they paid for him. They paid way too much for a guy that is going to be a 20, maybe 30 goal scorer on that first line. You traded away a big prospect in Highlander and Rodion Amirov, and especially when you don't have a first round pick next year because you picked up Jason Zucker last year. It's some really dumb moves by the Pittsburgh Penguins, and they should have just kept that pick and made the pick instead of picking up Kasperi Kapanen. Next up, Nick Bjugstad. Nice little cap dump. This was going to happen, and it wasn't that bad of a deal. Nick Bjugstad needed a new place to play. He gets a year to play there in Minnesota. We'll see how well he does. If he can rebound, if he can play a lot better, we'll have to see how well he does. And then this big deal where they sent Patrick Hornquist to the Florida Panthers for Michael Matheson and Colton Scurvio. And I just gotta say, Scurvio, not too bad if that's how you say his name. Probably not, but who really cares? Michael Matheson is not the defenseman the Pittsburgh Penguins need. This is not a guy that's going to fix up your defensive core. He's not going to be the guy that's going to save your team. This is a horrible pickup by the Pittsburgh Penguins on a guy that's locked up all the way up until 2027. It's a dumb deal for the Pittsburgh, actually until 2026, but this is a dumb deal for the Pittsburgh Penguins, and this is not going to work out very well for them. They want to talk about clearing cap space. They didn't do that. They didn't clear cap space. They just added on a guy that's going to be locked up for the next 6 years, and it's going to be a pain in the ass to move away from this guy. Patrick Hornquist was a really easy contract. You only had to pay him for the next 3 years, and you were able to get rid of him to the Florida Panthers pretty easily. And, I mean, what you picked up was, God, nothing, man. Like, holy crow, what a bad deal for the Pittsburgh Penguins. And for him playing on the top 6 pairing, sure, but what happens if Christopher Letang gets injured? Now you got to either trust CC or Matheson. Dumb move by the Pittsburgh Penguins. And then they traded away Matt Murray. You weren't going to be really getting anything for Matt Murray, so a second-round pick in Gruden, not too bad. I don't really know very much about Jonathan Gruden, but he is a 20-year-old there. Nice little young prospect from the London Knights. Usually when you play for the London Knights, usually you turn out to be a pretty good player, so we'll see how Jonathan Gruden turns into there for the Pittsburgh Penguins. They didn't really drive too much. They got Joel Blomqvist, nice little prospect there for the team, but nothing really too much there for the Pittsburgh Penguins. Moving on to the re-sign stage, they got Cody Ceci, which was just a horrendous deal. I don't think they should be even having Ceci on the team. I don't think he even should be in the NHL, and most likely he will. Jankowski, really good defensive player. He really is, but struggled offensively this past season, only putting up 7 points. So you're going to have to see him rebound, and maybe he can with this Pittsburgh Penguin team. But their third line is definitely not the strongest in the world. That's for sure. Their third line, piss off. The third line's not the strongest in the world. They got McCann, Jankowski, and Rodriguez. And you're going to be asking for a lot from that line to produce offense, which I don't know if you're going to be getting a lot of offense from that line. Rodriguez, he could be that kind of like that underdog player, that unknown, that underrated player that could possibly come out and produce a bunch of offense. Sam Lafferty, same thing. Huge PK guy. Tristan Jarry, really nice contract for the next 2 years at 3.5. Lets them afford that contract because, I mean, if he asked for any more, they wouldn't have been able to get him underneath this cap that they have. Then they also got McCann back on the team for the next 2 years, which is a really nice deal for him. He's been producing really good. He's getting back up to where he was kind of supposed to be as a potentially. He was really huge in Vancouver, and then he just never panned out there in Vancouver until now. He's kind of panned out there in Pittsburgh, and he's doing really well. Last year he did do pretty well, and I think he's going to be a great third liner for the team. And then they got Ricula as well. Overall, the Pittsburgh Penguins don't look too bad. They don't look terribly bad, but they're definitely not the greatest team right now, especially in the division that they're going to be in. It's a very thick division. You got a lot of good teams in there, with Washington and Philly kind of dominating that division, with Boston and so many other teams down there as well. It's going to be very hard for Pittsburgh to even make it into the playoffs. I'm going to give this team a C for their offseason. They didn't do very well. The moves that they made, picking up Matheson and Ceci, was terrible. I'm sure the McCann, Jankowski, Rodriguez signs were not too bad. Kapanen, it was a horrible deal. They should have just kept Highlander, and that first round pick would have been a better idea for their future, to develop that future and to kind of continue that going. I understand that they want to continue making it to the playoffs because of Malkin and Crosby being older, but there was other ways that you could have went about it. I mean, there was Marshall. Vegas is still looking to make some moves. You could have made some easy moves with the Vegas Golden Knights. You could have done either other teams as well. You could have got Tyler Toffoli for dirt cheap as well, almost the same cap as Kasperi Kapanen. So I don't know what the Pittsburgh Penguins are really doing. I think it's horrible asset management by the Pittsburgh Penguins. I'm giving them a C for sure. Definitely not the greatest offseason. So let's head it off to me and Perlo, as we're going to get into some more detail talking about the Pittsburgh Penguins and how well they did this offseason. Hello everyone, as now we are here at the interview part of the video, as we got the main man Perlo Wisdom, which all his links will be down in the description below if you want to check out his content. We actually been doing some standings. We're predicting what will happen this year with this crazy and wacky season that we're going to be having, as we have a 56 game schedule with all these weird divisions. We just talked about the Eastern Division not too long ago with Washington and Philly and Boston, and talking about how the Rangers might even creep into the playoffs, maybe even Buffalo. So Perlo, how's it going, my man? And what have you been up to?
It's going good, but I've been just chomping at the bit to get on here and talk about hockey with you, man. Yeah, we just did Eastern Division prediction sort of thing on my channel, and now we're doing this one here, and this should be very interesting. Pittsburgh Penguins, right?
Yeah, the Pittsburgh Penguins, as you guys see there, Sidney Crosby. A team that me and you both don't like too much. Jimmy Boy, we're not a big fan of his moves. We don't really need to talk about his draft because there wasn't very much of a draft. They got Bloomquist. Nothing too much to cover there. But we'll talk about the first trade of the offseason. It was kind of the first trade of the offseason where Kasperi, Kapanen, Aberg, and Lindgren went to Pittsburgh for Warovowski, Rodriguez, and Highlander, and not just that, a first-round pick as well. To say that this was an overpayment was, yeah, it definitely was. Kasperi Kapanen, solid guy, but what is your opinion on this deal? As the first official trade of the offseason, was it a boom or a bust for Jimmy?
All I got to say is Kapanen better pan out because this is This is fire your general manager type stuff right here. Now, one thing I got to give Rutherford is he's never one to not take a risk. This is a risky move. One thing for sure, even if Kapanen does turn out, I was a big fan of a Amirov right off the get-go. So um, when they picked a Amirov, I was like, ooh, this could look ugly. But you're trading your first pick in a deep draft, a very
Hmm.
deep draft, 15th overall, for a guy who wasn't able to crack the top six for the Leafs the whole time he was there, a guy you traded away at one time and now have brought back again in hopes of finding some chemistry with Crosby and Malkin. That being said, let's face it, Pittsburgh is not caring about the future at all, obviously, not even a little bit. The rebuild in Pittsburgh is going to be ugly, 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 ugly. But it's not happening now. So I kind of get it in the sense that guys that can get 50 points in the league that can skate like Kapanen and Ken are not easy to find. But I think they could have picked their spot a little better.
And you know what? I think the reason why Kasperi Kapanen was such an enticing piece was maybe that he could have worked great alongside of a guy like Sidney Crosby, especially since he's had 20 goal seasons where Kasperi Kapanen has looked really great. But to say that you give up a first round draft pick in this deep of a draft and a big prospect like Haylander, like what are you doing for a guy like Kasperi Kapanen when you originally had him on the team? It just seems like really, really bad asset management, which when you're a winning team like this, you want to be able to um, not throw away everyone. Kapanen could have been a very useful part to your team, but you did get, I think it was the Phil Kessel trade. I think Kapanen was traded in. Yeah, it was the Phil Kessel deal where they got the first. So I guess in return, they almost got the same part, but they still gave up a first round pick to Toronto when they gave. I don't know that it's definitely horrible asset management by Jimmy. As we'll get on to the next deal that he made, where he traded away Nick Bjugstad to the Minnesota Wild for a conditional seventh pick. It was a small little pick. It definitely wasn't a huge move. It was nice that they got the salary off. Problem is, they had to retain it, but it's only for a 1 year deal. But we'll move straight on to the next deal. Patrick Hornquist is going to the Florida Panthers for Colton Sceviour, can't say his name properly, and Michael
Skeever.
Matheson.
Yeah.
How do you think of this deal, and especially all the controversy when Patrick Hornquist was apparently throwing out his gear in front of the house, which was pretty funny rumors to read about. But what do you think about this deal?
I didn't hear about that, but I think that's probably more Patrick Hornfist being Patrick Hornfist in a funny way than an angry way.
Yeah, most
He's
likely.
a very good human being, that guy. And I don't think this was at all easy for Rutherford to do, which even makes it more odd that he got possibly the worst top four defenseman in the league last year in Matheson with a horrible contract to boot. Again, this is Rutherford putting huge, huge faith in a coach to be able to turn around a guy who looked in Florida, and I thought he looked in Florida the first 2 years like he was going to be a really good defenseman. I'm going to admit it that when they gave him that contract, I remember doing a video saying this could work out really well for them.
Mm-hmm.
But it seems like Matheson is one of those guys that got the money and either put too much pressure on himself or decided vacationing was more important than focusing on. And that's what happens usually, one of those two things when you get these bulk contracts. Maybe took too much of a breather. I don't know what it was, but I do know that Matheson looked horrible in Florida for the last 2 years, like very horrible. So Florida gets a guy like Hornquist, who is always great for a room. And if anybody needs some good room presence, Florida is it for sure. So that wasn't a bad move in that way. But now for Pittsburgh, I'm just going to say right now, from what I've seen, this is a terrible move. This
Mm-hmm.
is a
It is a
terrible
terrible
move.
move.
Skeever is great in a sense that, I mean, he's 31. He is what he is. Fourth line guy. He's going to give you everything he's got. He can pot a couple every once in a while, but he's getting past his prime already. And Matheson has just been an absolute dumpster fire who's got to somehow Sullivan's got to turn this guy around. If he does, I suppose Rutherford looks like a genius, but I got to see it before I can ever even come close to saying that.
And that's the thing too. Like last year, they weren't that bad on goals against. Goals for, they weren't that bad. If they kept Hornquist, Hornquist was still a decent player. He is aging. That's the biggest problem with Hornquist. But you only really had a couple 20 goal scorers last year. You had Getzel, Rust, and Malkin. Like, who else do you got for goal scoring? Unless Kapanen really takes over that spot for Hornquist, it's going to be a rough year for them. And then the Matt Murray getting sent off to Ottawa. Do you believe in the goaltending that Pittsburgh has right now with Jari and DeSmith as their tandem, especially in the division that they're in? We talked about it in your video. This is going to be a really rough time for Pittsburgh, especially their goaltending. And how do you think their goaltending will hold up?
Yes, and I highly recommend you check out the video where you can see where we put them in the standings. But um, I like Jar. I've liked Jari ever since he played for the Edmonton Oil Kings. I liked him. I thought this
Hmm.
kid's going to play. I did not think he was going to be. I did not know if he was going to be as good as he was, as he became. I thought for sure he'd be a good backup, but he's become much more than that. In fact, he was so good. I think he actually put a scare into Murray, and that's the way Murray just went. Oh, I thought it was good until Jari came in. I really, really like Jari. Uh, uh, Projo. Professor Joe Boric, who also does videos with us and is part of steelflyers.com, by the way. He says that he thinks Jari, and he's a great goaltender guy, very good when it comes to goaltenders. He says he thinks Jari's every bit as good as Carter Hart. So, whoo, that's saying a lot right there. But I don't
Hmm.
necessarily disagree with him. His numbers pan out. They show really well. I don't blame them for what we're going to talk about probably down the little road here. You're going to talk about the with Murray, but now it's the DeSmith thing I'm concerned about. DeSmith did not have great numbers in the AHL last year. Now, he was extremely deflated when he put up good numbers, and it was Murray and DeSmith, right? And Jari came up and kind of supplanted DeSmith, and Murray went and DeSmith went down. And I remember reading some things where he didn't take it well, and it sounds like he didn't handle it well in the AHL. It's possible he comes back into the NHL, gets his head straight, and goes back to the numbers he had before. But that's too much of a risk for me to put anything on right now. I don't like it. I don't like that part of it in a condensed season that you got to rely on a guy that had poor numbers in the AHL this year.
No, maybe he was knocked off because of the fact that he got sent down and maybe he wasn't trying in the AHL, which could possibly be a case, right? You get sent down after he did produce decent numbers for the Pittsburgh Penguins there at 916. He was 15-11 for them during the 2018-19 season. He wasn't too bad. So maybe he just wasn't trying in the AHL. Maybe he was just saying, hey, I don't, if you guys want to send me down to the AHL, I'll wait until you guys call me back up because I'll take my time. And Jari really did come into that spot last year. He really did play great. He could be a total big difference maker for the Pittsburgh Penguins. But now we'll get into the free agent acquisitions there for the Pittsburgh Penguins because I don't like what they did, to say the least, for this free agency. They picked up Cody Ceci. They got Jankowski. They got Rodriguez to some cheap contracts. They also brought back in McCann for another 3 years at 2.94. How do you think of the free agency that the Pittsburgh Penguins had? I mean, we all know what Cody Ceci did. He was one of the worst analytic players in the league last year, especially defensively. So, what do you think about their off season so far?
Well, again, to me, I hate to say this over and over again. It just appears to me that Rutherford is putting everything on the coach here. Like Jankowski's had a year and a half of had good seasons and just went totally into the tank offensively. I think you brought up that his actual analytic numbers were actually pretty good, although his ice time kept on going down and down and down in Calgary. So Rodrigue has struggled in Buffalo, went to Toronto, couldn't establish himself. He's got a lot of speed, but he can't just seem to put the whole game together. So again, You're relying on the coach here. And Cece, if 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 Sullivan gets Cece to play a 5-6 spot reliably and put up some analytics that are even average, he probably should get coach of the year next year. If
Hmm.
there's one thing I will say. This is Sullivan's moment to shine because if this team makes the playoffs this year, I think possibly you've got to give it to him for coach of the
Hmm.
year. Unless, of course, again, you've got the Tortorellas out there that lose half their lineup and still make the playoffs, and then you got to give it to him. But it's going to take some amazing coaching from the whole, not just from him, but they brought in, I think they brought in Talkett, didn't they? No, not Talkett.
Oh, who did they bring? Yeah, they
Uh,
fired all their assistants, I know, and they brought in
uh,
some new people. But
one of my
I actually,
favorite Philadelphia Flyers of all time, and it's not Recchi.
oh
Recchi, not
yes,
talking. Recchi. They brought in Recchi. They brought in the coach for the Washington Capitals that got
Rudin,
fired. Yeah,
And
Reardon. And
Mike Voleacki as their assistant captains.
yes,
Rudin
so
will
coaching
oversee the team's
assistant coaches.
defensive
Yeah,
group.
yeah. So they are
Rudin might,
relying heavily on their coaching team to turn these guys around.
yeah,
And
like
let me
Rudin's
say, if
taken
they
over the
do,
defensive team.
if I mean, CC, you're not even turning somebody around; you're turning somebody into a player. But Jankowski did put up some good numbers: 30 points in 70 games at one time. He looked like he was going to be a solid third line center until who knows what happened. I still think there's room problems there in Calgary, by the way. But and then Matheson, they thought enough of him in Florida to give him that deal, and I kind of liked him. If you change it, if he turns around, but these are just so many ifs, right?
There is a lot of ifs. Like you have to have Jankowski really produce for you. You have to have Kapanen produce for you. You gotta have Malkin and Crosby stay healthy because you don't want to be playing McCann up in the top six, nor Jankowski, nor Rodrigue. There's a lot of big ifs with this Pittsburgh Penguins team. As we'll get into the last part of the video. What's your grade for the Pittsburgh Penguins off season, and what do you think they'll do this season within their division?
I think they're D minus.
D minus. Whoa, that's the lowest
Yeah,
grade we've had. Actually,
yeah.
I've given Arizona an F. That's the lowest I think we've given. But yeah, D minus. Yeah, you know what? I might agree with you on that. I think this off season has been pretty bad. I might even just give him an F, honestly. They didn't
I
bring
hate to
anyone
give
in.
an F, but
I think they deserve an F. The only player that they brought in was Kasperi Kapanen, but even then they lost the deal for Kasperi Kapanen. They lost the deal for Patrick Hornquist. They lost the deal for Matt Murray. I mean, they didn't really bring in too much. They brought in Gruden and a second round pick. They lost in picking up Cody Cece. Their free agent moves, not bad. Jankowski and Rodrigue are not the worst, but can they be third line guys? Jankowski was only getting 11 minutes of ice time a year. So it's going to be a weird team. Any last thoughts on the Pittsburgh Penguins there, Perlo?
yeah, well, I gave him a D minus rather than an F simply because I do think he's putting a lot of faith in Sullivan, and I love Sullivan. I think he's a fantastic coach. He's done a lot of great things with Pittsburgh. Um, he could do it, So that D minus is, if there's one thing, he just seems to have been putting that on the coach, and he could be right. Sullivan could turn these guys around, and Pittsburgh could look like gangbusters. But
Who knows?
that's
There's so
just
many
not a
ifs.
strategy that I would want to roll the dice with. So, but that's why I'm giving them a minus. As far as where they're going to be in the division, I'm not going to tell you because you're going to go over to watch it on my
Watch
channel.
the video, goddamn right.
Yes.
So we'll end it here, guys. Thank you very much for watching. Make sure to like and subscribe. Check out Perlo's channel in the description below. Me and him have been collabing a whole crap ton. I've been absolutely loving it, and we're going to continue to do it on this channel and his channel. So go check his channel down the link in the description below. I'm going to end the video here. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you guys all later. Adios, amigos.